Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Yud Gimel. We're going to continue in what we've been doing about all these different languages of Nedarim. We're still on the question of Rami bar Hama. So I'm going to review the question of Rami bar Hama that we started at the bottom of Yud Aleph Amud Bet, which we've been dealing with all through yesterday's daf, which is Rami bar Hama asked, if I say, okay, remember the topic that we're discussing here is what we call hatpasa. I want to make clear everyone understands what hatpasa is. Hatpasa v'neder is when I say, this will be forbidden to me like something else. So it's basically connecting two items. This will be like that. And that has to be, if we're going to do hatpasa, it has to be what we learned yesterday, taval hanadur. Today, finally, the Gemara is going to tell us where in the pasuk it appears, even though I told you yesterday, but the Gemara hadn't actually addressed it head on. We're going to finally get to the Gemara telling us, which you would have expected in the first place, how we know it has to be davar hanadul and not davar hasul. Okay, again, that means, okay, just to give the categories again. So if I'm saying this is like this, it has to be something that was vowed originally. Okay, at some point it was a vowed item. The whole debate of Rami bar Hama is, what if it's no longer a vowed item? It was, but it's no longer. Again, what does it mean to be a vowed item that's no longer a vowed item? Well, it could, two things could happen. It could become permitted, right? Or it could become permitted and then forbidden, right, at a later stage, but it could be a forbidden. If it's davar ha-mutal, if it's permitted now, right, again, that's the question of Rabbi bar Hama, but let's just forget about it was vowed. If I say I'm connecting, this will be forbidden to me like a permitted item, of course, that's not a vow because it's permitted. If I say this is forbidden to me like a forbidden item, forbidden by the Torah, it's also not a valid vow. The whole question of Rami bar Hama is, what if it's like basar zevach shlamim after zrikat dam? I have a piece of meat here, and I have another piece of meat. One piece of meat is coming from my peace offering, which right now I can eat because I've already sprinkled the blood, but originally I couldn't. And I don't say the words. If I said the words, this is to me like peace offering after the blood was sprinkled, it would clearly be permitted because that's permitted. But if I just have the piece of meat and I say, this is like this, I don't know, am I, right? The question is, am I connecting it to what it was originally? That originally it was something, it was an animal that was permitted and I decided it was going to be for a sacrifice and it became forbidden until I went through the whole process of the sacrificing it. Or do I mean right now, which is right now, it happens to be able to be eaten? So that's the big question of Rabbi bar Hama. After 3 attempts, one by Rava, one by the Gemara itself, one by Ravina, to try to get into an answer. In the end, the Gemara suggests maybe it's a machloket tanaim. And for that, we brought this machloket about bechor. If you say, harei alai ki bechor, this will be forbidden to me like a firstborn animal. Okay, now again, firstborn animal is sanctified already from the womb. However, we also designated ourselves. So because of that, at this point, the Gemara assumes, which the Gemara is not going to assume any longer. But right now, the Gemara assumes we're going to call it davar annul. Okay, just like what we've been talking about. Originally, it was a vowed item because the owner sanctified it. Then came along, I gave it to the Kohen sacrificed it. Now it's called davar hamutal. And if you have this piece of meat lying next to that piece of meat, that's where we ended at the top of our daf. They set it up exactly like the peace offering. We have this piece of meat and that piece of meat. This piece of meat of bechor is right now permitted because we already went through the whole process and it's sitting in a Kohen's house and the Kohen's allowed to eat it. So if I say this is like this, do I mean mutal, in which case I'm not saying anything? Or do I mean like it was originally when the original owner sanctified it and that whole time until it was sacrificed, it was forbidden because it was davar hanadul. And then that would be exactly like the basar shlabim. And look, it's a machloket. Rabbi Yaakov osil, Rabbi Yehuda matil. Rabbi Yaakov says no, you can't eat it because it's a valid neder. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's not a neder at all because, right, one says it goes by the original, one says it goes by its status now. And then we would say tannaitic. Okay, second line of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not the machloket. Now something we took as a given yesterday is no longer going to be a given. Lo, dekule alma. Okay, it's going to be a little back and forth and ping pong. I'll already tell you the central idea so that when you read this, you'll have the background, you'll understand where we're going. What they're basically going to say is very simple. The machloket between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda is specifically about a bechor. Where does a bechor fall? Is a bechor, now, what happens? It's your firstborn animal. So as soon as it's in the womb of the mother, it's sanctified. That's what you call kadosh merechem. There's a lot of sugyot, especially when we get to Mesechet Bechorot. There's a whole Mesechet about this. Not the entire Mesechet deals with this, but part of it talks about this whole idea that it's sanctified from the womb. So it's different from an average korban, where I take an animal from the street or from the wherever, right, from the farm, and I say, this animal is sanctified. When I sanctify the animal, right, I took something that wasn't sanctified and I sanctified it. Now, bechor is in between, because on the one hand, I'm actually obligated, and we'll see it inside today, to sanctify it. On the other hand, it's already sanctified. So it starts off life as a davar ha'asul, even though maybe it becomes a davar nador, but it's really davar ha'asul. And the machloket between the two of them is, how do we perceive bechor? Do we focus on the fact that it was born sanctified, which means it's a davar ha'asul, and your neder won't be a neder? That's Rabbi Yehuda versus Rabbi Yaakov, who is going to view this as davar hanadul, because you are commanded to sanctify it. Even though it is sanctified already, you still have a commandment to sanctify, and therefore and then it will be a neder. So that's the whole debate, but you'll see it's a little bit of a ping pong till we get there to the whole understanding. So they basically say, forget about it. It's not that you had a piece that's sitting here after Zrikat Damim, after the blood was sprinkled, when it's already permitted. And then the debate would be, are we going back to the original, or is it go by now, which is what we thought? No. We could say that we're still talking about when the bechor is in its forbidden status. You have the animal before the blood was sprinkled on the altar, okay? Which means it's forbidden at this point. So now the question is just, right, my time and demand is shari. So why does he permit it if it's forbidden? Amar Kra, and here's the pasuk we've been waiting for, ki yidor, right, ki yidor neder laHashem, okay, ish ki yidor neder laHashem. So ki yidor, because it says yidor neder, the double language, ad sheyador b'davar hanadul. It has to be a neder that's connected with some other vowed item. Lafuke b'chor dedavar ha'asur. Comes the one who permits, which would be Rabbi Yehuda. We're explaining why does Rabbi Yehuda permit? Because he says this is not a neder in the classic form of a neder. This is a neder that you're connecting to your matzpiece, as we said, on a davar asul. It was kadosh mirechem. From the moment it was conceived in the womb, it became the firstborn of its mother. It was already sanctified. Umanda amal, manda asal, the one who forbids. Amar ka laHashem. Wait a minute. You didn't read the rest of that pasuk. Ish ki yidor neder laHashem. Why laHashem? Just be neder. Why does it have to be to God? Lerabot davar hasul comes to include even davar asur. Now, don't be fooled by this. This sounds like this goes against everything we learned yesterday. That even a neder on a davar asur is a problem. But most of the commentaries do not understand it in this way. Most of the commentaries say it's coming to include a particular case of a davar asur, which is an in-between case, which is our case, which is the bechor, which is both sanctified by humans and, right, so it's both a davar nador and a davar asul. Well, since it's this in-between, since both were sanctified from the womb, but I also am commanded to sanctify it, and I do sanctify it, or somebody does, that puts it in this category that's also going to be included. Again, it's not clear whether he has it does sound like from the simple reading, he totally disagrees with this whole halacha, but most of the commentaries don't understand it that way. So now they say, okay, we're going to do the ping pong, which is, okay, if he says laHashem comes to include davar asul, what is Rabbi Yehuda, who doesn't think it includes davar asur and doesn't think it includes bechor, what's he going to do with the words laHashem? Uman deshare, the one who permits, right? We're going to keep calling Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov, right? Rabbi Yehuda is the one who permits, and we keep saying, and the one who forbids, which is Rabbi Yaakov. Man deshare laHashem mai avidle. What does he do with the word laHashem? Mibayin le lematpis bechatat v'asham. He brings a different in-between case. What in-between case does he bring? A sin offering or a guilt offering. Normally, we think about davar nador, we think about harei alai olam, right? I decide randomly, I want to voluntarily bring an offering to the temple. I say this animal will be for me, right? A korban olam. A chatat and an asham is a little bit different because while on the one hand, it's davar nador, it's also not exactly because A chatan and asham, I'm commanded to do. I did something wrong. I have to bring, I'm obligated. It's not voluntary. However, I'm not obligated to bring a particular animal. I'm obligated to bring an animal. So when I designate a random animal on the street to be brought for my chatan and asham, that is considered davar anador that's going to be included here by the word Lashem. Okay, that's what he basically says. So again, Lashem, what does he do with it? He needs it for lematpis b'chataru v'asham. That's going to be a davar anador, which kind of borders on davar asul. It's Lashem because you're commanded, but yet you sanctify the animal. To which the Gemara asks, even though it's pretty obvious what the answer is, but ma re'ita, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that's included in davar anador, but bechor is not. Ma re'ita l'rabba chatap asham u'lotziat bechor. Why? Right? It sounds a little random. Why chatad and asham do you put in the nador category, but you don't put, right? Why is Lashem coming to include that case and not the firstborn case? So they say, Marbe'ani chatat v'asham shu matpis b'neder, u'motzi'ani et ha'bechor shu kadosh mi'me'emo. There's a difference because, again, the animal I took on the street to be my chatat or asham was a random animal that I sanctified. So that's really a davar anador. It's true. I had no choice. I had to take something, but I could choose whichever animal I wanted. However, in the case of the bechor, I didn't have a choice. That animal was already sanctified. So that's the difference. Now, manda asal. So now go back to Rabbi Yaakov, who forbids and views bechor as davar hanadol. What does he do with the fact that it's kadosh mirechem? Bechor nami matpiso b'neder. So manda asar, the one who forbids, says the following: Bechor nami matpiso b'nederhu. Even a bechor is considered to be a davar nadul, something you vowed. Why? Right? Until now, it kind of seemed like it's really not. Tanya, it says in the following braita, Mishum Rabbi Amru, it said in the name of Rabbi, Minayin lenolad bechor betoch beto, shemitzvah lahakdisho. How do you know that when a firstborn is born in your flock, that you're commanded to sanctify it? Shenemal hazachar takdish. Okay, it says here in the pasuk in Deuteronomy Tvarim, chapter 15, verse 19, Kol habachor asher yivaled, any firstborn that's born, bibukarcha uvitzoncha, with your cattle and your sheep, hazachal takdish laHashem elokecha. The firstborn male you should sanctify. Takdish means you sanctify it. So there you have it. The pasuk tells you, you sanctify it. Even though it's true, it's kadosh mirechem, it's already from the womb sanctified, but you're commanded. Since you're commanded, that turns it into Rabbi Yaakov, into a davar anadol. Uman deshare, well, that kind of does seem to prove that it's a mitzvah to sanctify it, which means it could be in the category of davar anadol. So Rabbi Yehuda, this is the end of this back and forth, who doesn't view it that way, what does he say? Kilo makdishle, milo mikadish. It's true you're commanded to sanctify, but let's say I didn't. Is it sanctified? Yes. So that means it's davar asul and not davar anadul. There's the simple proof. And basically, like I said in the beginning, this is why I set up at the beginning to make the back and forth, it's a lot of back and forth where they learn all these things from the verses and but in the end, what they're basically saying is the machloket between the two, which we tried to say had to do with, you have this piece of meat after zrikat damim, and it's now permitted, but you say this is like this. Do you mean like it was originally or like it is now? No, that's not the machloket. The machloket is, how do we perceive bechor? Do we perceive it as a davar ha'asur, or do we perceive it as a davar nador? Okay, and even if we perceive it as a davar nador, it's a bit of an exception to the rule, right? It's a davar asul that has elements of davar nador, and the word laHashem comes to include it and say you can also be matpis on the bechor. Okay, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says no way, no how. It's davar asur. It's kadosh mirechem. You're sanctifying it. Really, yes, it's true. You're commanded to do it, but it doesn't affect it at all. Its status starts as davar asur, continues to be davar asur until obviously you sprinkle the blood and then it's permitted. But we're talking about that whole early stage. And therefore, that's the machloket. It has nothing to do with our case. And we're done with Rami Bar Chama's question. We unfortunately do not get to an answer. Continuing on. And let's go back to the Mishnah on Yud Amud Bet, because we're actually going to read the whole Mishnah because we're going to relate to different parts of it today, both now and later on when we get to other Mishnah, we're going to compare back to here. In fact, at the very end of our daf, we're going to go back to here also. Ha'omer lachulin she'ochalach lo kasher, lo dechi, tahor, tamei, notar, pigul, asul, right? If you say la chulin, which means not chulin, what I will eat from you, which means it's a korban, which is only according to Rabbi Yehuda, because remember, Rabbi Meir doesn't hold that you can infer from the negative the positive, right? You can't say not chulin means korban, okay? So anyway, this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which we then said, even though Rabbi Yehuda appears at the end of the Mishnah, it's really all one flow. If you say tahor, tamei, notar, pigul, asul. If you say ki'imra, kadirim, ki'etzim, ki'ishim, ki'mizbeach, ki'echal, ki'Yerushalayim, those are all things that have to do with sacrifices, or even any other thing the Mishnah says has to do with the altar. Afapisha is kir korban, even if you didn't mention the word korban, harez in the darba korban, that would work. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Hamer Yerushalayim la'amar klum. You would have to say ki Yerushalayim. You need the kaf like this. If you don't say like this, which actually makes a lot of sense because we're doing matpis beneder. Say this is like this. If you don't have the word like, which is a letter in Hebrew, kaf, then it doesn't mean anything. That's Rabbi Yehuda's approach, right? So where's Rabbi Meir? And now this, you're going to see, we saw this a few times already. We're going to see this throughout. We're going to keep going back to this all the time. They're trying to figure out which is Rabbi Meir's opinion, which is Rabbi Yehuda, and then they'll say, oh, this looks like Rabbi Meir, but it doesn't fit with something else he says, or this looks like Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't fit with what he says. We're going to keep going back to this over and over again. So we've already done this before. We're going to do it more again. So now they bring in a braita. So we're going to do the same thing with this braita. Imra le'imra ki imra. So you can already tell me who. Okay, well, you haven't seen what it says yet. Dirim la dirim ki dirim. Okay, so imra le'imra ki imra. Okay, these are all saying either the object itself, and imra is a lamb, le'imra, right, as an imra, ki imra, like an imra, or dirim la dirim ki dirim, right, the deer is the place where the animals live, eitzim la eitzim ka eitzim, these are the wood used on the altar, ishim, the fires, la ishim ki ishim, mizbeach la mizbeach ka mizbeach, the altar, heichal la heichal ka heichal, the sanctuary, Yerushalayim li Yerushalayim ki Yerushalayim. Kulan, now it all, okay, these are all the first word you're going to say. If you match it up with the following words and you say, Kulan she'ochal lecha asul, if you say, let's say, Yerushalayim, that I eat from you, it will be forbidden. Because you're basically saying, even though you didn't say, it will be like Yerushalayim, you're basically saying all your food, anything of yours, will be for me like Yerushalayim, even though I didn't say the word like, okay, which obviously doesn't match Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that doesn't work. Okay, so it's obviously Rabbi Meir. That's clear right now. But if I say lo ochal lecha mutal, if I say Yerushalayim or Mizbeach or whatever it is, what I won't eat from you, it's permitted because I'm not actually referring to anything. I'm saying what I won't eat from you. Well, then what is it on? Nothing, right? It's not your food. Basically, I'm saying so. Your food, not your food, will be. What are you talking about? So that's a meaningless statement. So now the Gemara says, that's the braita. Man shamina le, delo shani le ben imra le imra ki imra. So who's the one who doesn't distinguish between these three terms? That already we know. It's Rabbi Meir. But what's the problem? The seifa is a problem according to Rabbi Meir. Ema seifa v'kulan lo ochal lecha mutal. If you add the suffix, or right, I'll call it prefix suffix, right? Even though it's not really prefix suffix, but beginning, right? First word, last word. If your first word is imra, so only according to Rabbi Meir will that work. If your second words, though, are lo ochal lecha, we said it'll be permitted because you're saying like an imra, like a lamb is what I won't eat from you, which doesn't really refer to anything. Well, then it's permitted. But what's the problem? The Mishna, which we're going to see in a minute, we're going to get to finally the Mishna that we already learned because they quoted it before. V'atznam lekorban lo ochal lecha Rabbi Meir osel. Which we had a bit of a problem how Rabbi Meir could be osel. Because again, let's look at this statement. Let's go back and we'll review this and we'll see it inside finally in its context today. La korban la ochal lecha, we assume means la korban. We already said lamed aleph merges into korban and it means lo korban, not korban. What I won't eat from you. Now, what's the reverse of that? Right? If it's, or the inverse. Not a korban, what I won't eat from you means it will be a korban, what I do eat from you, and therefore it's forbidden. That can't possibly be Rabbi Meir, because that holds michlal avat hashomein. So they have a question there on this Mishnah, which we're going to see inside. And as we keep referencing it, but soon we'll see it in its actual location. Va'ama Rabbi Abba, so they don't raise the question because it's obvious. We already talked about that. But Rabbi Abba brought to explain. When you say la korban, lo chalacha, really that Mishnah must mean lit korban, for a korban, right? There's a huge, we're going to see this over and over and over, that there's letters that function in different ways. Like it could be li, which means it's not short for lo korban. It's just li korban, as a korban. Li korban yehe, break between the first part and the second part. Li korban yehe already means whatever's in front of me or your stuff is all going to be a korban for me. Lefichach lo chalacha. It's not the way we understood in our Mishnah, which is it on foods that I'm not eating from you, and then it doesn't refer to anything. It means, therefore, I won't eat anything of yours. So if Rabbi Meir reads the line li korban lo ochalacha as li korban yehe, and therefore lo ochalacha, and forbids it, then our Mishnah, which says li eitzim, li mizbeach, li Yerushalayim, all those shelo chalacha is permitted, that wouldn't make sense. It should be the same as la korban. Le eitzim yehe will be like wood, and therefore lo chalacha, and it should be forbidden. So the second part of that braita, I'm sorry, I think I accidentally said Mishnah a minute ago. The second part of that braita doesn't match Rabbi Meir in the next Mishnah. So we're stuck. To which the Gemara says, Hada Amar lo imra, Hada Amar le imra. It actually says in the text lo le imra, but it should be lo imra. Okay, it's corrected in the Bach. Anyway, the point is, there's, and this is exactly what I said before, which is sometimes you use a lamed as le, with two dots, that's just called a shva underneath. Sometimes it's with a petach, la, and it means lo imra. So it all depends what you said. If you said la imra, it means lo imra, and then it's going to be lo imra, lo ochalacha, you're going to be permitted because you're not really saying anything. But if you say le imra, then you're saying it will be for an imra, right? And then it will be le imra yehe, it will be for an imra, leficha lo ochalach. That's like the next Mishnah. Okay, that's the resolution. We're going to have something very similar to this further on at the end of Amud Aleph. New Mishnah, which is, we're almost there. Ha'omer korban olah mincha chatat todah shlamim. Okay, these are all sacrifices. Notice it doesn't have a kaf. Okay, this is going to be obviously Rabbi Meir. Shani ochelecha, right? Anything I eat from you, right, is a korban, is an olah, is a right, etc. Asul. Okay, it's forbidden because again, you're being matpis in a korban. According to Rabbi Meir, this works even without the what we call in Hebrew kafa dimayon. Kafa dimayon is ke, this is like that. Even without saying this is like that, it's obvious that's what you mean. Okay, you're basically saying korban. This will be a korban, meaning this will be forbidden to me. Rabbi Yehuda matil, because he says unless you use a kaf, it's not going to work. So here you see it explicitly. Right, what we saw in the last mission, the way we explained it, it was. We thought maybe Rabbi Yehuda was just talking about Yerushalayim needed a kaf, but now you see it's everything needs a kaf. Ha korban, ki korban, korban shel chalacha. Okay, the korban is a repeat, but the new ones here are ha korban or ki korban. Right, ha korban we assume means the korban. That's what usually a hey in the beginning means. Although we're going to see maybe not. Okay, hey aleph, just like lamed aleph. Lamed aleph means not, right? No. Hey aleph means this. Okay, so ha korban could be, and that's going to be part of this confusion later, could be this, okay, this korban, or it could be the korban. Now you might say, what's the difference? We'll see. Sound not too different, but we'll see. So ha korban, ki korban, korban shel chalacha, asul. That will be forbidden. Again, this sounds like Rabbi Meir, even though it doesn't say anyone's name here. Right? The first line, it's a little bit of a weird Mishnah because the first line says Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda disagree. The second line is said by nobody, right, without attribution of a name. The third line, we only hear Rabbi Meir, we don't know what Rabbi Yehuda says. La korban lo ochalacha Rabbi Meir oser. We assume Rabbi Yehuda must disagree, and that's that line that we struggled with, that Rabbi Abba came up with that unique interpretation, which causes a lot of problems with other places. So now the Gemara says, Katane, it says in this Mishnah, Korban ha-korban ki-korban sholcha lecha asul. Stama tana. Now, notice it didn't say Rabbi Meir, it just said asul. But we know, stama tana Rabbi Meir. The lo shani leben imra leimra, right? Rabbi Meir doesn't distinguish between imra, leimra, ki-imra, and therefore our Mishnah must be Rabbi Meir, which we already know, that we've said a few times. So again, that line in our Mishnah must be Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Meir, but if you're going to assume, so now they're just assuming that wherever it doesn't say a name, it must be Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, the katani hakorban sholcha lecha asul. This is exactly the same structure we keep doing, which is we're assuming this is Rabbi Meir, but it doesn't seem to fit in the other part of the Mishnah with something else Rabbi Meir said. So the katani hakorban sholcha lecha asul. Why would hakorban sholcha lecha be asul? The hatanya, it says in a braita. Modim chachamim leRabbi Yehuda be'omer. Now, if you're not reading this inside, I'm going to read it to you inside so you know what the difference is. Ha-korban, which is two words. Hey aleph, korban. Again, we're assuming ha-korban is a combination of two words, like I've told you before, that words, letters drop off, words merge together, especially if it's an aleph, right? It often just disappears, and you do one whole word. Okay, so you end up with ha-korban must be a combination of ha and korban, which means this korban. Again, exactly what that means, it's not so clear. But in this braita, it says that the chachamim agree with Rabbi Meir. With Rabbi Yehuda. Now, who's the chachamim if not Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir is the one who disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that if you say the words ha-korban, remember, Rabbi Yehuda says you have to have kaf, ki, this. So Rabbi Yehuda obviously in ha-korban is not going to allow it. So neither does Rabbi Meir apparently. Says it's also not a vow, which is going to go against our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah, ha-korban, he said was a vow, and we assume that was Rabbi Meir. Remember, the middle line in the Mishnah doesn't have a name to it, but we're assuming it's Rabbi Meir because it seems to match Rabbi Meir. It certainly doesn't match Rabbi Yehuda. That middle line, just to review again, ha-korban, ki-korban, korban, sholcha lecha asul. That came without a name. But we assume the only one who doesn't distinguish, or who thinks that all these are okay, or vows, is Rabbi Meir. So yeah, modim chachamim le Rabbi Yehuda b'omer ha-korban, v'ha-olah, v'ha-mincha, v'ha-chatat, right? This korban, this olah, this mincha, this chatat, she'ochal lecha, anything that I will eat will be like this korban, like this olah, like this, something like that. Is mutar. Why? Shelo nadar ze ela b'chayei korban. What you're basically saying is, here's this korban, by saying ha-korban. And you're basically saying, what I mean is in the life of this animal. Okay, I will not eat from your stuff, right? All of your stuff, I will not eat in the life of this animal. Now, that's not a neder. A neder has to be a davar nadul. The life of this animal is not something that you, right? That's something that the animal exists. However long the animal lives, that's not something that you vowed about. So ha, according to Rabbi Meir, wouldn't work either. So how could our Mishnah, where it says ha-korban, which we assume is short for ha-korban, and just got shortened, how could you say it's forbidden if Rabbi Meir himself says it's not, and we assume it's Rabbi Meir because there's no one else that could match? To which, turning out I'm a bet, the Gemara says, lo kasha. Don't worry. Just like we distinguished before between lit and la, this is even easier to distinguish. Hadamar ha-korban, hadamar ha-korban. The word ha-korban could be the korban, not ha-korban, this korban. It's not the same thing. Korban is just a regular, like the article, the korban. That's not the same as saying ha-korban, which sounds like you're saying in the life of this korban. My time, why is it different? Hayei korban kamar, because we're assuming when you say ha as a separate word, you mean in the life of this animal. By the way, hey and chet switch a lot. So it could be ha is like chaye, and somehow they get also to the life. Not 100% clear how they get to the life of the korban from here, but let's take it as just an assumption. That's how they understood it. Again, it's very hard. I told you one of the struggles of this Masechet is it all has to do with linguistic details that we're not sensitive to anymore, because every time and every language has its own nuances to it that change over time. So while that might be obvious to them why ha-korban means chaye korban, it might not be so obvious to us, but we have to accept it as a given, as that's how they read. Okay, that dealt with that problem. Now we get back to the age-old problem that we've mentioned a number of times already with our Mishnah. Katane la korban lo ochalacha Rabbi Meir osel. How could that possibly be? The Rabbi Meir in order to say la korban lo ochalacha is a sur, you would have to say it means not a korban that I will not eat from you, which basically means it is a korban what I will eat from you, which basically is what forbids you. And that totally goes against Rabbi Meir's whole approach, which is we don't infer positives from negatives. So therefore, I'm a Rabbi Abba, as we already know. It's a unique case here. He understands it differently. He understands la korban lo ochalacha as le korban. Nasaka omer le korban yehe. It's as if he's saying, this will be for a korban. Lefi, meaning all your stuff to me will be like a korban. Lefichach lo ochalacha. Therefore, I won't eat any of your stuff. Okay, and that's how we resolve it. Again, this was where it comes because it's on this Mishna, and then they just quoted it in all sorts of other places. New Mishna. Haomer lechavero, konam pi midaber imach. My mouth will be konam. Remember, konam is one of the languages of Isur, like korban, we said konam, konas, all those things. Konam pi, my mouth will be konam, midaber imach, meaning I'm taking a vow not to speak with you. Yadi osaimach, okay, you have to remember, this connects to the konam. Konam, my hands, right? The subject is konam. It's konam, my mouth from speaking with you, my hands from doing work with you, which basically means, I guess, anything I create, anything I make, you can't benefit from. Ragli mehalechet imach, and konam to my feet for walking with you. I will not walk with you. Asul, the neder is valid. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute, Urumini, this contradicts a braita. Chomer b'shvuah mi b'nedarim u b'nedarim mi b'shvuah. It's very important. Braita, it sets up the differences between neder and shvuah. We've talked about this in the introduction. There's a stringency about oaths that don't apply to vows, and there's a stringency about vows that don't apply to oaths. Chomer b'nedarim, shenedarim chalim al hamitzvah ki bereshut. Ma she'en kein b'shvuot. Stringency about nedarim, that nedarim apply to mitzvot just like reshut, meaning I can vow to do a mitzvah. That will be relevant. Masha came b'shvuot. We already learned this because shvuot, I can't swear on something I already swore about. So I can't swear I'm going to keep a mitzvah because I'm already sworn in to keep a mitzvah. Okay, if you haven't listened to Gefet, it came out a little bit later than the daf we learned, so I didn't mention it in class. But Gefet this week came out last week about mushba va'ome mehar Sinai, which is the whole concept of what does it mean we were sworn at Har Sinai? Why can't we take a shvuah? This whole topic is Gefet's topic for this week, so recommended listening if you haven't listened yet. But that's not relevant for our purposes right now. Chomer, this is the important part. Chomer b'shvuot, and not neder, not vows. Shashvuot chalot al davar sheyesh bo mamash v'she'en bo mamash. Tangible and intangible items. I talked about this in the first class. I could say I'm taking an oath not to sleep, or not to eat, or not to talk to you, or not to work with you, or not to walk with you. But Masha'ain came in a deriving, but I can't take a vow like that I can't take a vow like that because a vow goes on an object. And this is not on an object. This is saying, I'm not going to speak with you. I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to walk with you. That's not a neder. So how could the Mishna say it's a neder? It goes against explicit braita. And the braitas agreed upon by everybody. It's a known thing. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda be'omer ge'aser pi lediburi yadai l'masehem raglai lilucham. It's not on a davar she'en bo mamash. It's not like saying, I vow not to sleep. I vow not to talk to you. I vow my mouth not to speak with you. I vow my hands not to work with you. I vow my feet not to walk with you. So the vow is actually applicable to, because it works because the focus is on the object and not on me. And taikanami, you can definitely infer this from the language of the Mishna. It doesn't say, I vow that I won't speak to you. It says, I vow on my mouth that my mouth won't speak with you. So if you say it in that language, it works. Okay? There's a debate about whether you have to actually say it in that language or it's just assumed that that's what you mean. Exactly. Anyway, there's a bit of a debate about how exactly this works. With that, Hadron alach kol kinuye, and we finished the first chapter. You might think, oh, great, we're moving on to a new topic, but no, we're continuing along with the same topic of all these words, how we use the words, etc. Elu, I know these are complicated, okay? It's very complicated, but as I said in other classes, if you understand why it's complicated, which is, again, what I said just before, which is language is very sensitive to, right, to time, place, all that. So because of that, there's a lot of discussion, and Nedarim is all about language and what your words can create. So we're going to continue along. This is going to be, somewhat different, but it's the same idea about what can my language, what do my words mean? What if we don't know what my words mean? How do we figure out what my words mean? It's actually very interesting from conceptual, even though sometimes it might be a little bit tedious. Ve'elu mutarim. Now we get to, right, we started with kol kinuyei nedarim k'nedarim, yado ki yado, right? All these languages are going to be forbidden languages. This is going to work for an neder. What about what's not going to work as a neder? Chulin she'ochal lecha. First category, we talked about this yesterday. Davar hamutal. If I connect it to something that's permitted, chulin is permitted. It means non-sanctified items. So if I say chulin, what I eat from you, well, obviously I'm not forbidding anything. And then from there, we go to a long list of davar ha'asul, which we also said is not an neder. If I connect it with a forbidden item that's forbidden for other reasons, kibasar chazir, like meat from a pig, kavodat kochavim, an item that was used for worship to idols. Ke'orot levuvim. This is an animal that they would take out the heart of the animal, and while it's still palpitating, they would offer it up to their gods. So the hides of an animal that's heart was taken out to offer up to their gods would be forbidden. It would be a forbidden object, which again would mean if I took a vow on that item, it wouldn't be a vow at all. Kinevelot utrefot, right? Nevela is an animal that's not shechted properly or dies without shechita at all. A treif is an animal that would have died within 12 months, to have a certain disease. Kishkatzim u'remasim, those are creepy crawlers, which we don't eat. Kechalat aharon uketrumato, right? This we already had inside. We quoted this Mishna before. The challah that we give to the Kohen, the truma that we give to the Kohen, which we're forbidden to eat. Mutal. So again, even though it started elu mutalim, they end this line with these are all permitted. Haomer liishto, hare at alai ki'ima. This is a very interesting case. One says to his wife, right, he's angry with his wife. He says, I will not sleep with you, just like I'm forbidden to sleep with my mother. Now, that would be davar ha'asul. It would be forbidden. This wouldn't be a ned. Comes the Gemara, the Mishna, and says, potchim lo petach mimakom acher, shelo yakel rosho lekach. First thing to understand before we get to the petach, they basically say, even though it's really not a neder, we're going to treat it like a neder, and we're going to make the husband go to a chacham, to a person who undoes vows, to undo it. Now, there's two ways you can undo a vow. One is charata, which is regret. Say, oh, I was in a moment of anger. I didn't mean it. Okay. According to the Mishnah, you can't do regret here. You can only use potchim lo petach mimakom acher. Now, there's different explanations of this makom acher. I'll get to it in a minute. Usually what a petach means is, we say this, they start asking, oh, you want to get rid of this neder? Well, did you realize that the ramifications of your action were blah, 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 blah? And you say, no, I didn't realize that. And you say, well, because you didn't realize that, we'll undo your vow. So that's what we do here. We say, had you realized that this would have blank, fill in the blank, then we wouldn't have done this. Now, the question is, what's this makom acher? So there's a bunch of interesting things. The Ran says, if you look about 5 lines from the bottom of the Ran, okay, I see you're asking, why is this not like pork, okay? There's a big difference why, and this is what we're going to see. It's really not a neder, but they were stringent. So it's the same. It's not a neder, but the rabbis decided to be strict, and then we have to say why they decide to be strict. So first we're going to understand what potchim mimakom acher, and then we'll decide then we'll see why they decide to be strict. Again, different explanations, but we'll read the Ran. So 5 lines from the bottom of the Ran, 6 lines. Aval ein potchim lo b'kavod imo. You can't, makom acher means you can't do the obvious, which is, I didn't realize it would insult my mother, okay? So you can't say that here. Why? First of all, there's a thing we're going to see much later on in our Masechet, that you can't use that as an excuse for an neder. You can't say, I didn't realize how much it would humiliate my parents. Okay, when we get to it, we'll try to understand it better. But you might have thought maybe that only works for a neder that's a Torah neder, that's a real valid neder, that you can't use that excuse. Maybe here you could, and no, they're strict, just like they are there. You can't use that as an excuse. Then he quotes the Rashba. So the end of the very last word in the 5th to last line, Harashba Zal, okay, says, V'dafka b'madir ishto, umatpis b'davar asur tzarich petach. Only in this case, here's your answer. Because this is very common. Spouses get into arguments very often. And because they get into arguments very often, a husband will get angry at his wife and take a vow like this. Okay? And below petach, if they would say, anytime you make a vow like this and do it, right, in a way that's not a problem, like matpis b'davar asul, first of all, if you start saying to the husband, well, if you take a neder like this, it's not valid, he might take a real valid neder and it will be valid. Okay? You can view this in two ways, right? Either we're worried, like the Rashba, like he quotes from the Rashba, that we're going to end up basically, he'll take this vow and you'll say, oh, this is nothing. And then he'll take another real vow because the vows are so commonplace here. But another way of looking at it is they didn't want husbands to take these vows. So they made it difficult for them to undo them so that they'll know next time not to do it. And I think it was a real way of understanding that this is a source of tension between husband and wife. And if we, try to tell people, don't say things that you'll regret in a moment of anger because you'll have to deal with them and it'll take a lot of undoing to get rid of them, then maybe we'll be able to prevent it in the first place. It's a very interesting line. Okay, end with a question on our Mishna. Now going back to something totally unrelated, this very first line, which we almost didn't really pay attention to because we've already learned this, which is going to be part of our question. Chulin she'ochalecha. If you say this is chulin, what I will eat from you, what can we infer from there? Right? Tamada amar chulin she'ochalecha. That's why it's mutar. Ha'amar la chulin she'ochalecha. But if you added that lamed again, right, what would it say? Lo chulin she'ochalecha, and then it would be forbidden. They're assuming that we can infer from this Mishnah, because it says chulin she'ochalecha, la chulin she'ochalecha will actually be forbidden. Because again, lo chulin means korban, what I will eat from you. Well, mashma lo lichulin lahave ela korban, right? Because it sounds like won't be chulin, it will be a korban, and it'll be forbidden. Now, who does this go according to? We're back to our question we ask at every Mishnah. Mani manitim. Well, Rabbi Meir can't be Rabbi Meir because halet lemichlal lavat hashomeahen. We're now already moving to Yudalit. I'll just finish the sentence. He doesn't hold michlal lavat hashomeahen, so that wouldn't be aster. So again, this is only an inference from our Mishnah, but we're basically saying since one can infer that from our Mishnah must not follow Rabbi Meir. Ela Rabbi Yehuda, hainu reisha. If you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, and it's trying to teach you by saying chulin shochalacha, it means lo chulin mashochalacha would, right? La chulin mashochalacha would be forbidden. He already tells us that, and that's why I particularly read this Mishna in the beginning of the Shiur. That was where he said in Yud Amabet, ha'omer la chulin shochalacha is asul, and we said that whole Mishna is Rabbi Yehuda. So he doesn't need to repeat it here. Again, he's not still repeating it. It's just he's giving the opposite case, right? Which would then be the foil to teach you, la chulin would work, chulin wouldn't work. Maybe also because chulin is such an obvious case. Of course, it's davar mutar. Why are you even saying it? So it must be to infer something, in which case our Mishnah sounds like it's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's not Rabbi Meir. We'll leave you with that question. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to read our Mishnah according to at least maybe one of them. With that, we'll finish today's class. Have a great day, everybody.